So to further continue on that point, just before moving forward, another example which I find important to relay here is that, there was a time when I must have been 15 or 14 or something. I was working as a car detailer, and we had this gentleman, and he was racing 1970s, 1960s cars, and they really were just like 6-cylinder straight engines, all steel, not a drop of plastic on the whole thing. The whole thing was wood and chrome and steel, and just a carbureted engine. And the whole thing about these races were they were supposed to race them stock, meaning as close to original spec as possible, and you had 4 or 5 judges check every car to ensure that they were all stock and very, very close to exact between competitors. And I had a job of hanging around this and cleaning this and make sure that I was looking for things like oil leaks and gaskets. These are all cork gaskets and stuff like this, and you have to be pretty inventive if you wanted to get an advantage. Australians tend to be pretty inventive. Things like America's Cup, invented the wing keel and stole the cup after 200 years or whatever it is. So this sort of ingenuity was at play. It's just an example. So these gentlemen, they worked out that if we put baffles, little steel plates in the carburetor with little slots and stuff so the float can still operate, that when you went around a corner, the fuel would go to one side of the fuel bowl. Now, that would starve the jets on the carburetor, so the cars would all sort of stall at the same spot. And it wasn't really a stall; it was just like a lost power for a few seconds. And then, so if you didn't lose that power, you would gain an advantage over the other guy. So we came up with these baffles. So you put these baffles inside the carburetor. Now the judges don't pull apart carburetors, do they? They just look at the carburetor with a torch and tap it with a hammer and say, "It looks like a carburetor to me." So I started to get a bit of an advantage with that. It's like, wow, these guys are something. What are they doing? Must be the tires. No, must be the tire pressure. Whatever. They have no idea. So take it a little bit further, right? Now, these cars are all negatively charged. When we swapped, now you got to be drinking a lot of moonshine to come up with these ideas, believe me. So let's swap the positive and negative. Well, that's crazy. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Let's swap the cables. So now it's positively grounded. And, oh wow, there's a little bit more power now. What happened? I don't know, but it works. Don't know why it works. It works. Well, shit, the judge is going to work that out, isn't he? So, let's change the color of the cables. You mean like positive's now black and negative's now red? Yeah, they'll never work that out. Okay, let's do that. So we do that, and now it's like turbocharged. Now everybody wants to have a look. They're like, can't work it out. No idea how it's going so fast. Must be the spark plugs. Must be the fuel. You must be doing something with the fuel. Or how much do you weigh? I mean, it's like all this stuff, Well, they didn't know why it went faster. They just knew it went faster. Well, 30 years later, we now know that the metal shims divider baffles that we put in the carburetor, in the fuel, touching the outside of the carburetor, which is positively grounded, which is mixing with the air coming in, was electrolyzer. It was electrolyzing the fuel. It was vaporizing the fuel in some way to impose a positive charge on it. It just gave it a real kick, It's like just creating a positive environment so that fuel had to do a little bit more explosion before it could rebalance. This is one example of strange lost knowledge that I knew that for 20 years, maybe more, before I finally said, now I know why I did it. Right? Now I know why I did it. That's very interesting. Another very crazy story, which is really out there in the wild or fancy-free knowledge, is, I went to India one time. I was talking to people about hydrogen and industrial, little factories and all sorts of big things, and some guy flew down this Tibetan monk from the top of some mountain somewhere to come and see me. It was quite a big deal, because he was investing some money with me, and he was like, well, I have to have a monk come and talk with you, and if he likes you, then we're cool. I said, okay, well, that's fine. So the monk comes down. It's a big deal, He used to come very, very far, and he's got a whole entourage of people with him. And in the end, I just sit in a room on a couch with him, and I didn't have an agenda, or just talk to each other, or say hi, and see if you've got any, to see what happens. And I said, okay. So it was really kind of weird, because it's a little couch and it's a monk and a glass of water, and he's just smiling, because he just he's just trying to let whatever happens happen. So he's not talking at all. And I said, hey monk, you live in the top of Tibet, right? And he goes, yeah, right at the top, in the wooden mosque at the head of the river, of the Ganges River, at the top of the mountain. I said, that's really beautiful location. He said, how long you been up there? Oh, my whole life, I've been a kid and all that stuff. No, that's really amazing. Hey, can I ask you a question? And he said, oh yeah, this sounds okay. Yeah, go ask me a question. And he said, anything you like. And I said, okay. Do you have singing bowls? Do you have singing bowls? And he said, yes, of course we do. This is a major part of our daily thing. And I said, okay, so your singing bowls, can you make rainbows come out of them? He goes, yeah, how'd you know that? And I said, oh, just this was interesting. I was just interested in the topic, so I thought I'd ask you, since you're the monk and all that. He goes, yeah, when we make the singing bowls, we do our chant and our method right, we'll get a rainbow. And I said, oh, that's amazing. You get rainbows in the rivers? I said, yeah. Do you get rainbows in the rivers as well? He said, yeah, I get rainbows in the rivers. I don't have to do anything. That's from nature. I said, no, that's really amazing. It's a very special place in the world, isn't it? And he said, yeah, it's very amazing. I said, okay. So I said, what about fire? Do you get fire from the singing bowl? And he goes, yeah, we do. I said, oh, it's pretty interesting. You can make fire from the singing bowl. He said, yeah. And I said, do you have to light it or anything? And he goes, no, sometimes it's like a blue flame. No lighter or anything. It's just a flame we get when we use the singing bowl in vibrational things. We believe it's from God. And I said, oh yeah. And you get other types of flames. He goes, yeah, we get rainbow flames, like rainbow flames. I said, okay, that's cool. And I said, is it hot? And he said, sometimes it's cold flame. And I said, okay. So I said, you can't heat the monastery with it or anything. He says, no, sometimes we use ceramic pots for that. We'll put a ceramic pot on top and it will radiate heat from the ceramic pot. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. A very nice conversation. Yeah. Have a cup of water. And really, it's a lot of long pauses, where we don't say anything. Because, this is valuable time. And we don't want to make the wrong words come out of our mouths. So I said to him, so where are you going after this? And he goes, well, I'm going to Austria, to the mountains, up to do some Germans and stuff were firing me up to the top of an Austrian mountain to look at the water up there. And I said, oh, that's pretty amazing. I said, you know, Victor Schumberger. He said, yeah, that's where I'm going. I said, oh, that's great. That's great. Very interesting. I'm sure you'll find the same things there. And I said to him, would you like to know what I think about this singing bowl and why it works? And he said, yeah, why not? I said, okay. Well, I believe that the rainbows in the water, in the river, from the low pressure altitude that you're at. So you've got water going down the river, you've got positively charged mountains from the air flowing over them, you've got low pressure, and this is creating like a singing bowl in the river. It's like that vibrational energized water. It's almost like a plasma water at the top of that, due to the amount of air ionization from the wind hitting the top of Tibet and all that. It's low pressure, so you're getting this, it's almost like an evaporated water effect, but it's a charge evaporation, not a humidity heat based evaporation. And I said, so, you know, I got another question. And he said, what? And I said, well, can you do that singing bowl fire dance thing down here? And he goes, what do you mean in New Delhi? I said, yeah. And he said, no, it doesn't work down here. And I said, why? And he goes, oh, because they're all bad spirited. And I said, no. I said, I think it's because of the air pressure. You know, you're coming down from the top of the mountain. You can't do it down here because the air pressure is too much. And he goes, well, that's possible. I said, I think it's what's happening. So we went on to talk a little bit more about water flame and that, but these characteristics, these foundational knowledge, you can't find in a book. Maybe you can, but it's unlikely you're going to go looking for it unless somebody tells you about it. So yeah, there might be a crazy witch with a singing bowl near you somewhere, but if you put that crazy witch on a mountaintop, that singing bowl does stuff probably she doesn't even know. So when we lower the air pressure in an air intake of a carburetor or a car, it does stuff that it doesn't do if you're trying to do it just in a 1 ATM, 1 atmospheric pressure, or 2 ATM, a positive atmospheric pressure. It won't do anything. It's less likely to do it. You're working a lot harder. So as soon as you add that vacuum to these things, these techniques, and you have positive charges, well, it does all sorts of weird things, doesn't it? So, I think that's enough for today in this podcast. I just wanted to set some foundational things for you to think about as you listen to these podcasts. And there's a lot more coming. I mean, we have engines running on green fuels, water nanobubble fuels, mixed gas fuels, and very efficiently. And there's people out there who may have copied or may have come up with it themselves, who are massive industrial engine makers. Now, some of those gentlemen are going after government or large corporate contracts, and they're not 100% sure if they want to be sharing information, or maybe they don't want to sell their products because of warranty issues. Maybe they don't fully understand all of the things that we're discussing here, but the privateer and the hydrogen hot rodder, they can go to town immediately on this stuff, and they can do it in any garage. They don't need permission. So water's fuel, and nanobubble water's fuel. Hydrogen is fuel, and hydrogen has a lot of energy. It's the most energetic fuel gas in the world, And that fuel gas is only magnified when its state of charge is controlled and or the laminar flame speed is adjusted, meaning you will use less hydrogen and have more force than heat. That means it's not Carnot cycle. Whilst we're very blessed that hydrogen can be laminar flame speed adjusted and still run an engine with the minimum amount of heat that it will have. Once we know that we can make explosive hydrogen rather than implosive, and it has more force than heat, well, you're trying to slow it. You're trying to slow down the performance, not speed it up. So there's two things. Slowing the laminar flame speed is not slowing the performance. It's slowing down the burn rate to give it time to heat, and that will run an engine fine. But the extra part, the extra layer, which we've touched on, is that when you control the charges, the state of charge of the engine, you could go further than that, and you suddenly move into more force than heat because you're making it explode before it can rebalance the charges. Then it will implode back to water. But that's an extra level above what 99.999% of people do when they fuel an engine with hydrogen. Even if they're controlling the laminar flame speed with the exhaust gas recycle EGR to slow down the laminar flame speed so that the engine runs. And that engine, even in that stage of technology application, is still more efficient in kilograms per kilowatt than a fuel cell. Much more efficient. So it's 2/3 more efficient than a fuel cell at full load, with 24-hour operation, with a full load warranty. But if you go further and you create a positive charged environment where this oxygen fuel mix or oxygen fuel on its own with air or gases you add explodes rather than implodes whilst controlling the laminar flame speed in a tunable way, you get a lot more force than heat. It's non-Carnot cycle. That means that you're slowing the laminar flame speed, but you're also now trying to use a lot less fuel. You don't have to put in so much hydrogen anymore because you have 2.5 times the power of gasoline per litre. So this is what Stan tries to explain, that once you know this, you realize there is no other fuel. This is the fuel. So we run engines on it now. Many people are running engines on it now. Many people are starting to understand the power of more force than heat. Hot rodders are going to town on it. Japanese have had this for a while, and if we're talking about turbines, if it's a turbine on an engine or on a plane, for example, it's a little easier to use these technologies, but they're operating in a slightly different way. But because it's on a jet engine on a plane, you're in the sky, so you don't really have to worry about big air filter ducting and big exhaust noise ducting. You still have to worry about birds and stuff, but it's not the same degree. If you try and run a turbine on the ground, you've got to have a lot of ducting in and a lot of ducting out, and in those cases you can't really use these fuels because it creates air spaces where gases can collect, and so that's not a good deal. It creates a explosive issue. But in an engine that doesn't happen because you're putting it straight into the engine. In a turbine you can debate whether or not how far you want to go, but most people will say 30% because they don't want to deal with all that ducting risk. But Is it possible? Totally. It's happening already in Japan. Can you go visit it? Probably not. They're not going to tell you that they've got this stuff there. They just use it. They're not stupid. So how powerful is it? Well, the more you research those topics, you'll find that a lot of this stuff was used in aircraft during and after the World War, and in a lot of surveillance planes. There's a few inventors who worked on the various Air Force jets and created applications for a lot of the things we're describing. And we'll go into that in more detail in the next podcast. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this second podcast and learnt something about the foundations of this sort of technology. There's more to explain, there's more to cover, there's more stories, there's more things that we've done and doing and distribute and sell and participate in, and all those things will be in ongoing podcasts. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing as a study member on our Patreon. It's $35 a month, and you get access to technical documents and direct conversations about questions you might have, or state of technologies, or parts components you might want to find or get access to. Secure Supplies Group is doing industrial energy storage and industrial megawatt class power plants, V12, V16, V18, V20 fuel injected engines running on carbon free fuels. And our hydrogen production, gas compression and storage and distribution systems also encompass oxygen, nitrogen and other gases of commodity value. Our hydrogen hot rodding magazine is open to have people who want to transition their automotive businesses to support hydrogen industry and nanobubble water more. So if you're a radiator maker, transmission maker, brake, battery, carburetor, oil, gaskets, coolant, anybody in the automotive industry who feels that they want to have a presence in the hydrogen hot rodding magazine, please contact me. We also have a variety of hot rods for sale, and we also have many builders building. So there'll be a time when it just is everywhere. It's already around, but there'll be a time when it's just everywhere. And it's not just a matter of running a V8 on hydrogen. It's if you're a person who's listening to this with a good resume, let's say, and you've made a hydrogen V8 and it's beautiful and fuel injected and all that, that's great. But the chances are that you're doing a very high percentage EGR recycle, and you're leaning on slowing the laminar flame speed of hydrogen down and diluting it to some degree with recycled exhaust gas up to 100%, and minimizing the air coming in to some degree if you're making steps towards oxygen on demand or hydrogen on demand. You might want to think, even before you do that, is get to more force than heat. Switch that thing over to positive grounded, and back off the dyno, because it'll be more than power you need. Just master those foundational more force than heats things, and that's more than enough. Hot rodders can do the rest. Are we suggesting we loop? No. What we're suggesting is that you can make nanobubble water fuel in a environment with characteristics which maintain the water suspension of the hydrogen oxygen in the water. So it's like a nanobubble water fuel. You've made it from solar, you've made it from the grid, you've made it from whatever power source you have. You don't need a lot because you're using some of the more advanced technologies for voltrolysis, which we will just go into more and more detail over these podcasts. But you've got a water fuel in a container which has got characteristics which maintain the status of that water fuel, meaning the bubbles stay in suspension. Now you can fill up your car with that water fuel. You don't need to make it on demand anymore because you can make it at home and fill up your car with it, right? So yeah, it might be helpful to have some capacity to make some nanobubble water fuel on your car, but it's not necessary. This is another interesting thing. So you might decide that you need a little bit of both, or you might decide that you don't need a little bit of both. Have a great day, everybody.